picking up my parents in Vegas and then driving them back. In that span of 3 hours or whatever, my dad must have said, "You live in some godforsaken place," like 4 or 5 times.
Hi, and welcome to the Desert Lady Diaries podcast, 30-minute conversations with women who have found their home in the Mojave Desert. I'm Dawn Davis, and this is episode 133. There's more information about the podcast at the website, desertladydiaries.com. And to engage with guests, listeners, or me, follow and like Desert Lady Diaries on Instagram and Facebook. And if you'd stay on through the outro today, I have some important information to share with you about the protection of Joshua trees and how you can help.
Born and raised in Appleton, Wisconsin, Jennifer Jungwirth came to the desert 20 years ago. A graduate of the University of Oshkosh, Wisconsin, Jennifer majored in French and Spanish with an emphasis on secondary education. Jennifer teaches Spanish at Yucca Valley High School, where she also serves as advisor to a number of student clubs and mentors beginning teachers. Jennifer is also very active in a number of community organizations, including the Morongo Basin Humane Society and Transition Joshua Tree. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. Thank you for taking time out of your busy getting ready to maybe or not go back to school schedule, and we'll get into that shortly. But what was your first experience with desert?
Upon graduation, I did not want to stay in Wisconsin. I felt really that a lot of people who stayed in Wisconsin got married and had kids, and that wasn't in my future. Like, I didn't see that on my horizon. So I put my resume out on a Foreign Language Teachers Association website page and was just like, fingers crossed, somebody contact me, let me go someplace else. And sure enough, one day I got home and my roommate's like, "You have a message from California?" And I'm like, "What?" So, called them and spoke to the French teacher, and he was from the Midwest and some of that. So we really hit it off. And he's like, "I would really like to interview you with the principal and stuff." And I said, "Oh, I was planning on coming out there for spring break just to kind of like check it out. I have an interview scheduled at Baker," which I had no idea where that was or what that was.
That was the short straw.
Yes, really, really short. But anyway, so they're like, "Okay, well, let's see if we can set something up." It just so happened that it worked out. I came out, I went to my interview in Baker, and I thought, "Oh my God, what did I get myself into?" And then I came to Yucca Valley and I did the interview, and it was crazy because in college, they were like, getting your first job is going to be super, super hard. Like the interview is going to be intense and it's going to be like crazy. And I was like, okay. So I was like prepped. I had like questions and like ready to go. We literally sat around the table, the principal's office at Yucca Valley High School for 45 minutes. And I thought we were just having a conversation. It was super chill. They're like, "What does your classroom look like? What are some teaching strategies you're going to utilize in your classroom?" and stuff like that. And then after 45 minutes, they're like, "Well, we'd like to offer you the job." And I was like, "Are you kidding me?"
My goodness.
It was so crazy. And I was like, "Oh, okay, that sounds great." So that's how I came to be. After the spring break, I had to go back and finish. And then August, I packed up a U-Haul and just drove my little belongings out here through the desert and was like, "Oh, okay, this is my home."
Wow. I was going to ask you what was that process like, but it sounds like it was just, go back, finish school, pack it up and go.
Yeah. I needed to get out. I needed to travel. I'd spent my senior year of high school in France. So I'd already been bit by that travel bug and I'd loved experiencing other cultures and different places. And I was like, now is the time. Do it now. So that's really kind of what kind of propelled me to kind of come out here and just experience something different.
And what was the reaction of all your people back home, like your friends and your family? Like, "Yeah, I'm moving to California," but they probably had no idea, probably thinking Hollywood Boulevard, California.
Yeah, for sure. My parents kind of already knew that I wasn't going to stay. They knew I was going to just go off and kind of explore because I've always kind of been a free spirit. And my friends were like, "Oh my God, you're going to California. That's so cool. I can't wait to come see you." Da, 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 da. And I didn't really kind of tell them where I was going, Palm Springs. I was like, "Oh, Palm Springs, movie stars and golf courses and da, 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 da." And I was like, "Yeah, that's exactly where I'm going to be." When my parents came out, I think I'd been here about like 2 or 3 years. My parents came to visit me and they flew into Vegas. And I thought, okay, I'll drive through the Mojave. People are like, "Oh, don't go through the Mojave. It's so dangerous. You're new here, da, 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 da." So I figured it out and I made it. I'm still alive. But picking up my parents in Vegas and then driving them back. In that span of 3 hours or whatever, my dad must have said, "You live in some godforsaken place," like 4 or 5 times. It was because it's so different.
It is the extreme opposite of green Wisconsin, dairy, cheese, curd central, which is lovely. I love Madison. I've spent some time in Madison, and it really is, but everything's really green. And to me, the dairy was just super fresh.
Yeah. You can't get cheese curds out here that squeak. I have to go home to get cheese curds that squeak. And people look at me like I'm insane. Like my husband was like, "What are you talking about?" So when I took my husband to Wisconsin, I'm like, okay, every dairy we pass, I'm like, "Oh, we're going here, we're going here, we're going here. Cheese curd, squeak. You understand now?" He goes, "Yeah, these are really good." I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah. So now he's hooked, right? And I have to ask, because my dad, born and raised in New Jersey, has been a Green Bay Packer fan his entire life. And at some point, my mother, it must have been for a birthday of his, actually bought him stock. So he is an owner of the Packers. Did you ever go up to Lambeau were you ever interested in the Packers as being from Wisconsin?
As I've gotten older, yes. Sports was not very big in my family. Like my dad and my brother are into cars. They're into cars and fixing cars. I learned how to drive stick on a 1940-something Dodge Power Wagon. That's how I learned, you know what I mean? In my family, if you can't drive stick, you're considered handicapped. So that's how we grew up. But as I've gotten older and living in California, and I have lots of friends who are Raider fans and Steelers fans, and I was just like, okay, gotta represent, dude. I can pull off a cheese hat any day, you know? So I've been pretty dedicated. I mean, my husband is a Chargers fan, like a San Diego, whatever, something like that. But yeah, so as I've gotten older, yes, I've grown more to enjoy sports.
Right. So you arrive here in Yucca Valley. What are you, like 20 years old?
I started teaching high school when I was 23. My kids and I figured out that I could have been in 6th grade and they would have been in like kindergarten or 1st grade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What was it like when you got here? I mean, obviously you're at a school with a lot of other teachers, so that probably became your primary friend group to begin with. But how did that all shake out for you? How did you get involved in the community and things like that?
The first 5 years, I kind of feel like I kept my head down and I just kept working. You have teacher friends, you know, and things like that. And I wasn't super involved in the community, you know, I just kind of kept to myself and kind of like, you know, because I don't want to say it's a closed community because it's not. You just have to find like the right places to be. But as I had gained more comfort and, you know, became stronger in my craft, I felt like I had more time to go out and explore. I got a dog, which led to hiking, and I did a lot of those kinds of things, and then helping out with the national park. And it was through school too, working with kids and always trying to find them volunteer situations and stuff like that. So like it really started, I became S Club advisor, which is tied with Soroptimists International. I became that advisor and met the beautiful Wanda Statham, who knows everybody.
Yes.
And she's like, so that kind of helped me kind of get my foot in the door. And I'd gone to some Soroptimist meetings, so I met some ladies that way. And then just as things kind of developed, got involved with the animal shelter. Mimi's amazing too. And that really helped in like wanting to like give more back to the animals. So I arranged the dog walks and stuff that we used to have. We currently don't due to COVID, but getting those and meeting a bunch of people that way. And then I don't know how I want to say sucked in to Transition Joshua. They had like a gathering at the Mojave Desert Land Trust. I was like, oh, this sounds cool. Let's go check this out and see, you know. I had met a bunch of people they were trying to start like a community garden, and I went out to Garth's place and I met a bunch of people and I was like, oh, this is cool. And I kind of got pulled in there. And then once I went to that meeting, I was like, oh, I could totally see doing some of these things. So I got kind of pulled into those. And I mean, I like giving back. And part of the thing that I do with Transition Joshua Tree is the food program. And cooking is my love language. So that's how I give my love back to my community.
I see it all the time in social media. You're always cooking or baking. I think that one of the times that I did go to Transition Food, the meal, because basically when COVID's not happening, there is a meal. It's usually like the last Sunday of the month
Yep.
at one of the local churches. And there's also produce that may have been left over from the farmer's market that people can come and take, but it's a free meal and it's community and it's bring your own utensils and everything. It's waste free. And you were selling sugar scrub.
Oh yeah, because it was about April because we did Earth Day and stuff like that. So for Earth Day, we were trying to raise money because we purchase the vegetables and stuff that are given away are purchased by our group because we're trying to get people in our community to have an option for vegetables and fruits and like healthy foods and stuff like that, as opposed to some of the other stuff that they get at other places or other food giveaways. So we were looking at raising money, like how do we raise money? So a bunch of us got together and we melted soaps, we made hand scrubs. We harvested cactus fruit. I taught the ladies how to make cactus jelly, just things like that to kind of make sure that our coffers stayed up so we could continue to provide this service for our community because we felt it was super important.
Right.
And then as we kind of like advanced and some other people got involved, Amzar Pottery now, they have a seconds corner where potters can like donate pieces that are not perfect. And that's now how we that's how we get our money now.
Okay.
So we don't have to we don't have to hustle so much. Because like literally we would work 3 weekends out of it, and put stuff together and like hope for an event and go do this and then sell here and there. I mean, we do put out a donation jar for meal, but a lot of the times the people that are coming can't afford it, which is fine because that's not the point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So.
Cool. Talk to me about these clubs at school because you're an advisor on a number of clubs, right? So there's the S Club. So for someone listening who doesn't know what Soroptimist is, can you just give a high-level description of what that's about?
Soroptimists is a group of women throughout the world who work together to make the world a better place. Our focus locally, I know, and I'm pretty sure it's probably on the national level, is human trafficking. So they do things with human trafficking. They do things with abuse. They work kind of closely with Unity Home and other places in our area to help women who are in need.
And then there's AVID program, AVID.
Yeah, it stands for Advancement via Individual Determination. It's a program that's pretty much nationwide. You do see it in some European countries as well. But the program at school basically takes first-time college goers and their families and teaches them how to get to college. So we teach them organizational skills like Cornell Notes. I teach AVID 12, so I do a lot of the college stuff, the applications, financial aid, scholarships, all that kind of stuff. But our club is focused on community service because our kids are required to do 10 hours of community service each semester. We also do fundraising to help pay for our field trips because the kids want to go visit colleges, obviously, because a lot of our students don't have that opportunity up here. So we raise money to take them on field trips to visit colleges. Sometimes we'll go on spring break and we'll do a 4-day spring break trip and go like to San Francisco and see 9 different schools in 4 days.
That's great because a lot of, like you said, a lot of folks here don't necessarily have that opportunity to do that and to have the guidance that you provide in filling out those college applications. And then I would imagine that the volunteer work helps to enhance any applications that they do send out to show how active they are in the community and in school.
I always tell my kids, when you're going to do community service, don't hop around. Find something you're passionate about and do that.
And then the other club that you advise is the Gay Straight Alliance True Colors.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it is a club where allies and LGBTQIA people can come together and have a safe space. We try to raise awareness on our campus for LGBTQIA issues. We work really, really closely with Safe Schools Desert Cities. They put on super fun events like Palm Springs Pride. The kids march in a contingency for Palm Springs Pride. It's one of the largest in the world with students involved. They also put on Pride Prom every year. So kids from 8th grade up till 20 can come to this prom event and just be themselves. We just started doing, like a few years ago, we just started doing summer camp. So we would go for like a weekend. It was like one of the first LGBTQIA focused summer camps for kids, which was a weekend, which is super fun just to let the kids explore out in nature. And we brought some really cool projects in and it was educational, but it was still fun to, like we did archery. Like some of these kids
I love archery.
I know some of these kids had never seen a bow and arrow before. And I was like, oh my God, this is so cool.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I think I did that at camp one year in Girl Scouts. So, well, that is, you are very involved and that's very generous of you to be so generous with your time. And now with COVID-19 having affected the end of your school year and now potentially affecting the next school year, you are in the process of a lot of webinars and trainings. And are all the webinars and trainings focused on just the COVID classroom? Or are there a lot of also the racial issues that we're having right now? That are constantly present. I shouldn't say right now, but it's more out in the open now.
It's kind of interesting because I have noticed a spike. I became aware of this. There's a Facebook group, and I'm not gonna get the name right, but it's basically how to incorporate Afro culture into teaching. You know what I mean? And like for the longest time, it's Black History Month, and you only talk about it during that month. And I'm currently doing something by Fluency, Express Fluency, and a few of the topics there, like I just watched one today, which was on marrying CI, which is comprehensible input, with authenticity and bringing those pieces together. Another one was representing the Afro-Latinx community, you know, and at first I was like, wait, what? And then I like went back and I like flipped through my textbook and I'm like, yeah, okay, huge piece missing. Just hit me the other day when I was sitting in a meeting. We had gone through training, and then they did breakout rooms, and I was in this room with like 4 or 5 other, and this young lady had said, this was super awesome because as I was going through high school, I never saw people like me in textbooks or in PowerPoint presentations and things like that. And I was like, oh my God.
Right.
So
it's hard to imagine from where you and I sit that being a thing. And it's pretty sad that since the 60s, which I would guess you're probably right around my age, I mean, all this stuff, probably up to 68, we were still just very young kids. And it's hard to imagine that we are now at this point in our lives when it's not incorporated into the curriculum.
Yep.
Yeah. So
we actually just had the principal's been super good, especially with all this COVID stuff going on. And this is the first year that I have no idea what's going to happen in 20 years of teaching. My mind is like, oh, I sat down today and I was like, okay, wait, we were done March 13th. So March, you know, April, May, June, July, August, like a month ago, my body was like, okay, ladies, start getting ready for school because you're going to go back to school. And I'm like, no, you have 2 more months to sit here. And I was like, what am I going to do? You know, but the principal's been super good. We just had a teacher town hall meeting where we were invited to come, and he had some focused questions, and we had talked about how are we going to become part of that conversation? You know, dealing like, what are we going to do? How are we going to work towards being involved in that? Because if we're not, I mean, for a lot of my students, like I'm guidance, you know what I mean? Like they come and ask me questions and things like that. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens and what we do. I will say this, as part of one of the groups of Transition Joshua Tree, we have a group that's called Heart and Soul that works to bring people together. And a small group of us had actually gotten together last year and started digging into white privilege and like understanding and doing readings and having discussions and looking at cultural appropriation. I've read some pretty heavy books, and I'm taking a little break right now just because I can't, like, I have enough to wrap my mind around, and I don't mean to sound like I don't care, but for my own mental health.
Right. Yeah. I'm curious. There's 2 things I want to ask you. First, how has teaching changed since you started 20 years ago to what you're experiencing now in the classroom?
Ooh, that's a loaded question.
Isn't it?
Wow. And I think partly like when I was 23 and I first started teaching, I was a little, you know, like, oh yay, everybody's great. Da, 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 da. I see a huge difference due to cell phones and social media. I see a lot of lack of self-confidence and kids not necessarily willing to I don't want to say, well, try, you know, like that critical thinking, like, you know, when we got thrown into distance learning, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to give it the best shot I can, you know what I mean? And I did all this research, I clicked this button and I screwed it up. And I feel like kids aren't willing to take that chance. You know what I mean?
Right. Fear of failure.
Yeah. Big fear of failure. Big fear of failure. And, you know, I try to just be super honest with my kids, and I tell them I make mistakes. I mean, one day I totally taught them the wrong word for belly button. And the next day I came to class and I'm like, kids, listen, I was having a little episode yesterday. I totally taught you the wrong word. We're all going to get at our notes. We're going to erase this word, and we're going to put the right word down. Now, just know that like I tell them, I'm a human. I make mistakes. Please, if you catch me on it, cool. Let's learn from it and let's move forward,
Right.
to try to build that and boost that confidence. But I see that kind of happening right now, which I don't really, it's not good.
No, and I wonder sometimes too, I mean, my first thought, it goes to the social media and it looks like when you look at people on social media, it quote unquote looks like they have their stuff together. But what you didn't see, I heard this on, I think, a podcast or something, what you didn't see leading up to that perfect photo that they just posted was like the 25 that they discarded because they didn't like what they looked like. So trying to keep that in check when you are scrolling through and they're on it all the time.
A lot of the times I talk to the kids about, especially if you don't get your homework done, what's going on? Well, I'm on my phone all the time, or I'm up super late because I'm on my phone and things like that. I'm like, you got to put it away. Even I, as an adult, like I admit it, when we went into this whole stay at home, whatever, I mean, hours just flicking through the thing. And I finally was like, listen, this has to stop. This is not good for you. So I put the timer on my Facebook app. And once I've done like an hour and a half, it says your time is up.
Well, fortunately, those tools are available to us so we can monitor ourselves if we find it difficult to do that and are just not disciplined enough. I find myself sometimes like I'll be writing my column for the paper and I'm like, oh, let me go out on Facebook and look at the events thing if anything's happening. 30 minutes goes by. I'm like, what are you doing? You came in here for something very specific. Stick to the plan.
Oh, completely.
The other thing I wanted to ask about with this COVID situation was once you all went on distance learning, were you at all surprised at the number of people who just did not have access? Were there a lot of kids that didn't have access? How did that all go down?
Honestly, I was not surprised about the number of kids who did not have access, just because, again, working with seniors, doing college applications and things like that. I mean, 2 or 3 years ago, I had a kid who did his UC app on his cell phone. You're talking 3 essays, click, 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 like that. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
You know what I'm saying? So for me, that wasn't a big shock. And like knowing where some of my kids come from, because I know my kids pretty well in the situations and some of them are in, like that to me was not a shock. I was not surprised. Which made it kind of sad, but.
Right, exactly. Well, did any of the teachers or does the administration know that this is an issue too? And then were there any steps that they took to kind of mitigate or stopgap to help with that?
Yeah. So what the school district did is they put out a survey, asked if kids needed computers, because maybe they had internet access, but they didn't have a computer. So kids were able to check out laptops and stuff from their various schools. As for internet, it's like super hard. Like even where I live, and I live like right behind the post office, like against the mountains. I still can't get high-speed internet because it ends on the corner. Do you know what I mean? So to me, that wasn't super shocking. So the internet thing was an issue, but the other thing that they did do is if students needed printed materials, we as teachers, so I did stuff in Google Classroom, and then I just took those things in Google Classroom and translated them into print, and then made print things that I would send to the assistant principals. And if kids needed them, they could just come pick them up on a weekly basis or however they were going to do it that way. So.
Right. I think someone that comes here as just a visitor of the park and lover of the desert, this might come as a surprise because it's not a side of our community that they see.
Yeah.
They just come in to visit and do the hiking or whatever it is that they do here and then go home. But I think they don't see this part of it. And I'm glad that we have the opportunity today to talk about it. Speaking of the park, do you get in there much with all of your involvement?
I used to go a lot, but not recently. When I was riding motorcycle on a regular basis, that was like, oh, okay, I'm home and I'm just gonna hop on my bike and I'm gonna ride through the park because it's a beautiful. And like now to me, a lot of the times it just feels like there's way too many people. Like I miss like when I first came out here and you could drive to the park and see like 2 people or 2 vehicles. And now it's like, I feel like it's been overcrowded. But where I live also though, I live back up against a mountain. So I know all the trails.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
There's all these crazy trails across the mountains behind my house. And I just spent summers and springs just exploring. And so I know all the different paths and stuff like that. So I can go there and not see a single person.
Exactly. Yeah. When it reopened this time, I made a point of going in, and it was like on a Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. And it was like the second or third day, I think, that the park was reopened, and happened upon lizards and bunnies just happily doing whatever it is they do when people are not in there traipsing around.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was great. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time amongst all of your learnings to come on and talk with me. I'm really glad. And before I let you go, though, I'm going to shake up the mystery jar and pull out 2 chips to ask some questions. Questions that Jennifer will answer will be available to the Patreon subscribers of the podcast. If you would like to hear Jennifer's answers to these questions, I encourage you to go out to desertladydiaries.com, click on the support page, and select the Patreon option. There's a video there that talks about what exactly Patreon is and why they exist. And you can sign up to be a patron and get Diary Unlocked content all the way back. I know it sounds very Diary Unlocked. All the way back to January of 2019 was when I started doing it. So let's see. The first question will be, you find a lottery ticket that ends up winning $10 million. What will you do? How do you define success? How do you cope with stress? And what is a closely held belief that you haven't questioned lately? Ooh, you got the hard exam questions. So if you want to hear Jennifer's brilliant answers, because I know they will be brilliant, to those questions, please go to desertladydiaries.com and sign up to be a patron of the podcast. Thank you again for being here today, and also for all the time you spend forming and shaping young people in our community, and also working inside the community through transition and the Humane Society. Thank you for the time that you put in.
Thank you.
I have a shout out to new Patreon supporter, Jordan G. Jordan, thank you so much for your financial support of the podcast. I hope you're enjoying those Diary Unlocked episodes. Lots of shout outs this week to folks who signed on to receive the new episode newsletter. So here we go. Big thanks to Mon P, Anna D, Karen H, Rob H, and Robin B. Thank you so much to each of you for checking out the podcast. I really appreciate you. So regarding our Joshua trees, there is a hearing on August 20th regarding removing the Joshua tree from the protected species list. Residents and visitors alike are being asked to help send comments or make phone calls, and I have a website for you where you can find out more detailed information, see some sample emails, and learn more about why there are folks that are trying to do this. I want to share with you first an email I received from Sant Khalsa, who was on episode number 24 of the podcast, and Sant is a photographer and an artist whose work has a lot to do with trees. So she's very invested in that. And she says, we are in the middle of a climate and extinction crisis, and we simply can't afford to wait to protect species such as the western Joshua tree. Under the current climate projections, they are likely to decline by upwards of 90% in the coming decades, while much of their habitat will be lost to development absent any strengthened protections under law. A California Endangered Species Act listing would support existing western Joshua tree populations, protect the habitat, and mandate recovery actions for their survival. The deadlines for your emails is Friday, August 14th, so you have some time. Again, the hearing is on August 20th, at which time a decision will be made as to whether the tree will remain on the list or be taken off. And you can also email elected state representatives to oppose at Chad Mays, CA, Bill AB 238, which would override the CDFW, California Department of Fish and Wildlife Protection, of the Joshua trees. You don't have to be a resident of any community in the Morongo Basin to get involved. We just would love your support. For more detailed information, go to www.everyleafspeaks.org. Again, that's www.everyleafspeaks.org. And that is the website of Christina Sanchez, who was also on the podcast. Just click the link on the homepage to read more about what's happening. There's also some sample emails there, as well as the names and addresses of who should receive those emails. Those trees are what make Joshua Tree, Joshua Tree. So if you have the time, we would love it if you would help us with this effort. Thank you. If you know someone who would like this episode, I hope you'll share it with them. Thanks so much for listening.